When I was 16, I told my father I was gay. You had better go and tell your mother. As I entered the bedroom where she lay, her gnarled fingers, misshapen through the rheumatoid arthritis, clutched the heating pad that she used to alleviate the pain in her joints. Heavy curtains were blocking out the afternoon sun. She had been prescribed anti-inflammatory drugs that had a side effect of drying out her tear ducts. Twice daily, a pipette containing synthetic natural tears would lubricate her eyes and keep them functioning. I have to tell you something. I inwardly flinched. I think I might be gay. Why did I say think? There was no doubt in my mind. In my body, I knew. I haven't got a son. I've got 2 daughters. What have I done wrong? It is wrong. It is in the Bible. You'd better leave. The silence between us irrevocably fractured. She turned her face away from where I stood and started to cry. The tears came quite freely now. I abandoned the melodrama that was being played out behind the net drapes of my parents' house and fled, not quite skirts billowing, to the end of the road to catch a bus to a friend's house. Her parents had been informed of this possible scenario and were willing to let me stay until I got things sorted out. My plan was to move to London and find the life I knew was out there waiting for me, but would not be found on the streets of this small northern town. As I was drinking hot tea and retelling the events that led to my outcast state, the telephone began to ring. "It's for you, it's your father," my friend's mother called through the kitchen, where I was still in the process of thawing out from the reaction of my parents. If only I had kept my mouth shut. Nervously, I took hold of the receiver. "We have been talking, and I'm coming to pick you up," he began with. "We should talk." And then, "Are you a queen?" Dad had no idea he was being talked to. He was talking about could be detect from the tone of his voice to whatever it was. I better not be one. As I sat at the, I don't know what that says, because it like
Formica topped kitchen.
Okay, Formica topped kitchen table, the gathering place for every important family event I can ever recall. I tried hard to numb myself to the situation, to the disappointment etched on the faces of my parents. My father stood by the door and waited for me to give him the answer he wanted. "No." "How do you know that you are?" He avoided saying it. "Had you ever had sex with a girl?" "Yes." I lied. "Have you ever had sex with?" Again, he couldn't bring himself to say it, to name me. "No." I lied. This was the last time my sexuality was ever mentioned. It was tiptoed around like I had some terminal illness that, if said, would rear up and consume us all. The lesson I learned from my initial revelation was one of how language and discourse is always productive. It brings a situation into play, it enunciates evaluations of the situation, and extends actions into the future. Looking back, what went and remained unsaid is far more descriptive and meaningful to my interpretation of that situation. I knew through their silence that my parents were holding out for a reversal, for a change of mind. In giving voice to what lay on the inside, I had created myself as I wanted to be seen and heard. In their silence, they were unseating that creation and hoping for an erasure of its possible existence.
Act 2. I remember the day my brother told me he was gay. I recall the conversation between us almost verbatim. I came to learn that Steve had come out to my parents when he was 17. He was in year 11 or 12 at an all-boys Catholic school. Steve turned to drugs around this time, and I was only 7 years old. I was spending a lot of time at our neighbor's house. I have more family memories of their family than I do my own. The words poof and faggot were used a lot in the mid-'80s. Between my defense of homosexuality and general gossip, slowly word got around that I had a gay brother. I did not hold back when questioned about my brother and almost dared people to say something negative in front of me. I was 12 years old, living with my parents and my sister. The year was 1984. I had just started high school and was having a little difficulty at the time finding my niche. My type of in-your-face defiance continued for much of my teenage years, affecting my life in many ways. My education, friendships, family life, and relationships would all suffer somewhat due to my choosing to accept and embrace my brother's sexuality. And it definitely hindered my relationship with my sister. Although we had never really been very close, we grew further apart as her outwardly negative reaction to Steve grew. My brother had been diagnosed HIV positive in 1984. Dad finally realized that he could lose his son, and my sister's attitude was more of a, well, if you play with fire. She pulled further away from the family, at least for the next 8 or so years. I found it very difficult to focus at school in year 9. No teacher ever discussed my brother with me, even though they had been made aware of the circumstances by my mother. It seemed like I was the only person at school who had a gay brother, and as it was the early years of the AIDS virus, people seemed almost scared of me. Like if they got too close, maybe they could catch it from me. The lack of emotional support at school and my ongoing bad grades and attitude resulted in a joint decision by the school and myself that I would be better off leaving school and getting a job. I was only 15 and had just completed year 9. By 1987, my brother had a new relationship. John was also HIV positive and a big rights activist, fighting for AZT and opening a halfway house for HIV positive people who do not have family support. I volunteered at the house, helping out in any way that I could. I was still not driving at the stage, so I would often have sleepovers at the house. Around this time, I was writing an English essay on the topic of HIV/AIDS. We were encouraged to read our essays aloud in class, and I was happy to do so, as I felt that my essay was of high quality. I stood there bravely as I knew my topic would be controversial. As I read my essay aloud, I could feel the tension in the room build. I continued on, proud of myself for knowing so much about my chosen topic. I could hear some sniggers around the room at certain bits, but I expected that. As I had only been at this school for a little while and had a small group of friends who already knew about Steve, this was the first time that I had openly discussed him, his house, my friends, their illness, their fight for medication. I could feel myself starting to become angry at one boy in particular. As I finished my essay, there was an uncomfortable silence. Even the teacher did not know what to say. I stood there waiting for feedback. I realized the teacher did not know how to respond, so I made my way back to my desk, shaking my head at the realization that I was totally on my own in the fight for HIV rights started to sink in. It was at this moment that one boy decided to say his piece. What a load of shit. Only faggots get AIDS and they deserve it, so what is the big deal? My feet were rooted to the floor. I could not speak. He declared, all people with AIDS should be put on their own island and left to die. I lost it. I started screaming at him at the top of my voice. All I could think of was wanting to hurt him, as he had just hurt my brother, my friends, me. I hope you get it from sharing your needles, you effing pig. By now, I was completely distraught. I was crying and angrier than I have ever been. I picked up the nearest chair and threw it at the boy. Finally, the teacher, who had become very quiet through all of this tumultuous argument, stepped in. He grabbed me and told me that my behavior was unacceptable, threatening me with detention and suspension. Again, the realization that I was on my own swamped me. I calmed down and turned to the teacher and said, you don't need to report me. I'm out of here and I'm never coming back. I walked out of the classroom without so much of a backward glance. I left. I never did return, and I never heard from the school, not so much as a phone call to see if I was okay or if I was returning. My education was over.
Act 3. Silence can be the deadliest weapon and safest shield. It is what I turned to and what I did when concerned by identities I never wanted to claim. Retreating into silence was the way to grin and bear it. I heard my calling by age 7. They had a word for boys like me. Sissy, pansy, poof. I now had names for something that I had hardly ever thought of at all. At age 11, I graduated to new knowledge: homo, freak, queer, hate, shame, reprisal. I understood how my life got discounted each day. I felt shy. Confused, alone, at age 16, I asked, what's a homo? And the anger and hurt had not been given voice. Prevailed, accumulated, spoken through a language of measurement. norms, and deviation that accounted for, explained, pathologized. Sissy, pansy, poof, homo, freak. I retreated into silence. Act 4. I would say that when he went to primary school, when he was 5, that is when it all started. We are an open family, and Paul has always tended to say how he felt, which obviously caused problems. His first teacher would often say to us, Paul doesn't mix well. He would rather play with the girls than with the boys. The school picked up immediately. It became an issue of a concern for them when he was choosing to mix with girls more than with boys. We were invited to the school and asked questions as to why we thought he did this. The teacher asked us about what he did at home and what we did. Said that we should try to encourage him to play more with boys' toys. As Paul got older and name calling progressively worse, he had always been a bit implement, and he became more outspoken. He would say that to us he was different, and we would ask, in what way? He said he didn't know, but told us it must be different because they are all having a go at me. We tried to be supportive. There was this one time when Paul had gotten in trouble with another student. That lad was calling him gay, so we went into school because Paul was getting upset and would come home and cry. We went to say to the teacher, he is not gay, for the simple reason that if we had said he is, then it would go about the school and make matters worse. I actually approached a teacher on several occasions and said, do you have a problem if he's gay? And they said, well, no, we don't have a problem, but the next thing we knew, we had a social worker at the door, and she wanted to know what happened at the school and what was happening at home. We told her about the name calling, that sometimes he didn't want to go in the morning. He would make himself sick, how he would come home crying, and how sometimes he would mess himself at school because he was afraid of going to the toilets. Throughout Paul's primary education, he went to 3 different schools. At the first school he attended was suggested to us that he would benefit from a fresh start, that he was in year 3. In the second school, they removed him because of bullying. That was when he was in year 5. When he started secondary school, it wasn't long before he stopped going completely. He said he didn't want to go to school because of what he had gone through before. He started making himself sick, point blank refused to attend. The school sent us letters, and we went to see the head to try to sort it out. We gave different reasons. We never said he was gay, but eventually we were called in again. And at this time, the deputy had told us about the rumors and that had been going around the school. I asked him outright if he had a problem if he was gay. He said, no, other people's do, and that if Paul lashed out, then there would be a situation. We cannot have that. The school didn't feel that they could be put measures in place to prevent that occurring. It was constructed as Paul and our problems, so we removed him to another school. However, it wasn't that long before it started all over again. And in the end, I got sick of it and went to school and said, I haven't got a problem with it, and I am his dad. We were then called to a meeting about his behavior and started by saying we were going to exclude him. The principal asked us, are you aware that he has a problem with his sexuality? We said we didn't have a problem. This particular teacher was getting in my nerves because he was saying, well, you don't know what your son is getting up to. And that's what did it. I said, you do know that Paul is gay. I went quiet and nobody said anything. But when they did, they said, no, we didn't know. But we were aware of something being out of joint and we didn't really know. I said, well, you do now. We have tried all sorts of different ways to deal with what has been going on, but we just never had the backup to fight it or anybody to help us. At the end of the meeting, Paul was excluded. They kept bringing up his sexuality, and at the end, I said, excuse me, you are talking about my son. Why does the sexuality matter so much to you? When he went to the next school, the homestead made it clear that being religious, he certain views at the point we knew we wouldn't be able to go to the school. However, we did feel reassured the school was reputation for being strict. The discipline was good, and the headmaster assured us that in the school, bullying didn't happen. What we did say was that Paul does have certain feminine ways, and we're told to not worry about that. How would he pass when he matured and started to grow up? It was about 6 months later that the problems began again. When Paul started being more open, the teachers didn't like it, and he was taken to the headmaster, who told him, "We don't want discussions in a church school about your feelings towards the same sex. Whatever opinions you have, you've got to keep them to yourself." There were a lot of incidents at the school where, to be fair, were dealt with. But when Paul was found in a gay chat room on the library computer, was as a family ended up going to see a counselor at the school instead. We knew Paul had been contacting gay groups he used to ring the gay switchboard and had made contact with 2 or 3 youth groups. Paul assured us that he hadn't been looking at pornography, and we believed him. Eventually, we were summoned to the school by the head, who gave us 2 options, that Paul would either be excluded or leave early in year 11. His younger brother, by this point in time, had started to become affected by the situation, getting called out of school because of the attention that his brother was receiving. When Paul first said he wanted to go to college, I was a bit apprehensive because of all that had gone on before. When we found out that his tutor was gay, it made us feel at ease because if he had a problem, we thought that this time it might be different. If there was a problem at college, we knew he would get on the phone and would be able to get through. It would be straightforward, and that was a good thing for us. Reflections and prejudice. Prejudice is something that is felt and expressed. It refers to a negative or hostile attitude towards another social group. Discrimination refers to an unfavorable action, behavior, outcome, or treatment. The distinction is simple. Prejudice is thought or attitude. Discrimination is the expression of that thought or attitude. Prejudice and discrimination on the bias or sexual orientation can be defined as the following. Homophobia is a fear of or hostility towards gay people or homosexuality. Homophobia is often expressed visibly, audibly, and sometimes violently. Coined in the late 1960s by psychologist George Weinberg, the term refers to an aversion to gay or homosexual people or their lifestyle or culture, and behavior or an act based on the aversion. Homophobia has typically been employed to describe individuals' anti-gay attitudes and behaviors. Homophobia can take many forms, including personal internalized homophobia. This is the individual's belief that lesbian, gay, and bisexual people are sinful, immoral, or inferior to heterosexuals, or incompletely as women or men. Such views are always learned, and lesbian, gay, and bisexual people themselves may share them. In this case, the homophobia is internalized when lesbian, gay, or bisexual persons internalize their belief that they are sinful, immoral, or inferior. They may hide their sexuality and try to make it mean less to them, decrease their expectations of life, or encourage in behaviors that are harmful to themselves or others. Interpersonal homophobia. This is dislike, fear, or hatred of people who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual. This dislike, fear, or hatred may be expressed through name-calling, verbal or physical harassment, or acts of discrimination. Interpersonal homophobia can be acted out through shunning, ostracism, or low-level harassment, or it can be manifested through verbal or physical assault. Institutional homophobia. This refers to the many ways in which government, business, churches, or other organizations discriminate against people on basis of their sexual orientation. These organizations set discriminatory policies, allocate resources unfairly, or maintain unwritten discriminatory standards for the behavior of members or constitutes. Cultural homophobia. This refers to social standards and norms that dictate that being heterosexual is better than being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. These standards and norms are reinforced every day in television shows, movies, and print advertisement, in which virtually every character is heterosexual, and every sexual and social relationship involves a female and a male. They also are reinforced by the assumption made by most adults and that all children, heterosexuals, do not realize these standards exist, whereas lesbian, gay, and bisexual people are acutely aware of them. It results in lesbian, gays, and bisexuals feeling like outsiders in society. You exhibit homophobic behaviors and attitudes when you think you can spot one, use words such as poof, dyke, fag, gay, or leslie as an insult, think that a same-sex attracted friend is trying to pick you up if they are friendly towards you, do not support the same-sex attracted friends when they break up with their partners, make unnecessary or rude comments or feeling repulsed by public displays of affection between same-sex partners, feel that gay, lesbian, and bisexual and transgender people are too outspoken about civil rights, assume that everyone you meet is heterosexual, assume that a lesbian is just a woman who couldn't find a man, or assume that a gay man is just a man who couldn't find a woman or secretly wants to be a woman, assumes that bisexual people are confused or want to play the field, and do not challenge a homophobic remark, fear of being labeled gay. Prejudice toward gay people and homosexuality can be brought about by
There's a problem loading her page.
Negativity about types of sexual behavior in relationships that are neither proactive nor within marriage, having religious beliefs that disapprove of sex or homosexuality, and having little to no sexual contact with lesbian or gay people. Questions for dialogue. What is your stance as a teacher when considering LGBTQI students?
I mean, when you have an LGBTQI student in your class, they should be treated just like any other student, and you shouldn't treat them any differently because of their sexual preference. I mean, your sexual preference isn't the major concern when you're getting an education. That shouldn't be your focus. So I don't really see why it would matter to you whether whatever your opinion on it is, it shouldn't make a difference. You have to be accepting of everyone because everyone's there to get an equal education.
Yeah, I feel like whether you're lesbian or gay or so on, that's such a small part of who you are that it shouldn't matter anyways, but it definitely shouldn't matter in the classroom when the only reason you're going is so that you can get an education.
That's what I agree with both of you. I think that it's definitely important to consider something like this when you're becoming a teacher, but it's not something I want to necessarily put forward in my classroom, like, oh, it's okay to do this, because I think it just should be known for all teachers. I don't feel like it should be made a point necessarily like, oh, I'm okay with this, but your next teacher might not be.
Like it should just be a common sense.
Exactly.
Okay, what would your school look like if there was a zero tolerance of homosexuality and heterosexism?
It's homophobia.
Oh, sorry.
I was like, what?
Homophobia and heterosexism.
I mean, you'd have a lot less bullying if there was no tolerance for it. You'd probably see more acceptance coming from people, but you'd also see people fighting that. You'd probably have different groups of students that popped up trying to say that they should have the right to feel how they want. And I mean, having a zero tolerance would probably help, stop that, and
it would alleviate some of it, I think, but like you said, it's not going to. The goal is for there to be zero incidents of bullying because of anything really, but because of this in this situation, but I don't know if you would actually ever get to that, because you can educate students all you want in the classroom about why it's not okay to act like that towards someone. But if they go home and their parents are not teaching them that it's not okay to act like that, then you're basically taking one step forward and two steps back.
Yeah.
I just think there's not likely going to be like a zero tolerance for it. I think that's still going to happen, and that putting these things out there is kind of just masking it, and that it's hush hush. Like, we shouldn't have to have a zero tolerance. We're not going to get rid of it most likely, but I mean, we can say like that's not allowed, but I don't think that putting in a whole thing is going to necessarily help. Like elementary student kids, they're probably not going to realize like, oh, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
I just don't think that it's going to solve.
It kind of reminds me of, like, we read one thing about, it was for racism. They made the anti-racism, I can't think of the word for it, but like the statement for their school saying this is what we will not accept and blah, blah, blah. I think that would be a good idea for something with no tolerance, because then it'll get the kids thinking about what is right or wrong, and what they can do to stop it, how they can see it, and then that'll get them involved in thinking like, what it was my part in this, what have I done to either further it. And I mean, obviously younger kids, like for elementary students, they're not going to completely understand it, but you can always start when they're younger, because that's when you learn so much of like who you are, is when you're younger, you get the foundation.
Yeah.
So you can always expand upon it when you're in high school, middle school, but I think starting that out and starting with a zero tolerance policy isn't a bad idea. I mean, there's going to be opposition to it, I'm sure, but it can't hurt to have it.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely smart to have something in place, especially like middle school, high school, like that's the prime time, middle school, and like maybe upper elementary. But I think if you start enforcing something too young, maybe kids are more likely to be like, oh, I don't know what that is. Like, okay, I'll just do whatever I want.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, what could you do? I know the word, but I cannot pronounce it.
Why can I not say it now either?
Pedagogically.
Pedagogically.
Pedagogically. There you go. To stop oppressive commentary. Okay, well, I mean, that's just talking about stopping it in your classroom as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like you almost have to stop that before it even starts. Like on the first day of class, your kids come in, especially like I'm gonna be teaching high school, so like I can be very like assertive and like not necessarily like talk about LGBTQI students alone, but you know, like we are tolerant of everyone's differences. Like you don't have to like it, you don't have to be friends with them, but you cannot be rude to them. Like you can't be rude to them because part of their lifestyle isn't something that you want. So like setting those ground rules as soon as the students walk in your door.
Yeah, I think also for elementary students, one way to get them used to or accepted of the idea of people of different sexual orientations and things like that is to use things like in word problems or in books that will show that. So because normally in word problems, it's like, Sally's mother and father did this. Well, instead you could say Sally's two mothers did this, or her two fathers did this, or just something like that, you know, or like you could have a picture in a book that looks maybe more like a male, but is actually, she goes by a female pronoun. So I think things like that can get children just more used to the idea, and then they don't feel so threatened by it when they come across it later. And as a kid, I don't think a lot of people, unless they've already learned it from their parents, they're not like actively thinking, well, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so if you start it from an early age, they're gonna think it's right. Yeah.
I think to kind of go off what you were saying, that like adding in those problems, I think you should definitely create problems that are, like you said, Sally had 5 trucks or something, and implement that it doesn't have to be dolls, or it doesn't have to be trucks for boys, like just mixing it up.
These
some.
gender roles don't have to be so
Exactly.
set in stone.
Yeah.
And that we could start that kindergarten, we can start that so early.
Yeah, the whole like pink is for girls, blue is for
Exactly.
boys. Well, don't go up to the girls and be like, well, here's your pink paper because you're a girl, and here's your blue paper because you're a boy. Just be like,
Here's
have
pink
all
or
the
blue,
colors,
yeah.
or have all of the colors, and just be like, pick your favorite color. Like, I
And
know
if it's
many
pink
girls.
and they're a boy, so like it
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yeah,
Like in the story when they were talking about how the teachers were concerned because he liked to play with the girls more than the boys.
mm-hmm.
If he's playing well, who
Why does it
really
matter?
cares?
Yeah. I'd be interested to like see like from that story what they were considering like was so feminine about him. Like what was he doing that was such a problem that
Yeah.
he was having to be excluded from the classroom? Because I mean, why would being girly like affect
Anybody
anything?
else.
Like
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Okay. What can you do to guarantee a safe environment for LGBTQIs? Well, I think we kind of just covered that when we talked about, like being assertive in the classroom and kind of integrating it into the classroom.
Making sure everyone feels like they have a right to be there and that they are safe in there, and having, like, from the other question, zero tolerance for the kids who might try to bully them or, spread rumors, whatever.
Yeah. Actively protect targets.
I would say that if a student comes up to you and openly talks about like something's not right, maybe with me, or they just don't feel like they fit in exactly, maybe make it more of a importance to try to get them to fit in, or to take everything that they possibly say like as a concern. Like make sure you watch the student or try to help them as much as
Like
possible.
you're not just
blow
brushing it
off.
off to the side and acting like, oh, that part's not that big of a deal. Yeah.
I think even if you just see people that kind of look like they're struggling, like you think maybe some kids might be excluding them or something, like just to easily like try to integrate them. Like, I mean, that's not saying that you think anything's different about them. It's not saying you think they're gay or lesbian. Just like if you see them struggling, to make sure you're incorporating them.
Into, yeah. Okay, affirm sexual difference.
I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier, having things that are set up not necessarily like one gender specific or heterosexual based completely. Like you could have multiple of these different ideas.
And I think, like, especially in my high school classroom, a lot of my junior year, my teacher, he would make us read commentary, kind of like this commentary from people that have experienced bullying because of that they were different in this way. And so for me, like in my English classes, when I'm teaching, make that a part of the reading curriculum, make them read stories about like how that makes people feel when you treat them that way. Like they're not just a face, they have feelings. And
yeah, and starting that probably in middle school is probably going to have you'll probably get a lot of people that are trying to like joke around about it, because in middle school people are really insecure. But I think getting them into that kind of topic will probably help them like understand or start to understand.
Enable positive classroom discussion of LGBTQI issues.
I think maybe just having like a safe space, making it like from day one, making your classroom feel like it's a safe space, that never like show any, if you don't agree with it, never like show that in your classroom. You need to always be accepting towards them no matter what. And I think if you start that from day one, they're going to see that, oh, you've been accepting me, I can say what I want, and then your whole class is going to be able to have a conversation a lot easier than if they feel like you're going to be judging them because they know your opinion on you.
Yeah.
I agree.
Challenge homophobic jokes or comments. And this instance, I feel like if you would hear a student making a homophobic joke or comment or something, maybe like you shouldn't do this, but my first thought would be to turn it around on them. Be like, okay, well, if I joked about this with you, like, how does that make you feel? Like, it's a part of who they are. Like, you can't joke about somebody's, they're going to live the rest of their life with that. Like, it's not a joke.
Yeah. I think for your age, that would work really well, just because that would probably get to them. They'd understand that. I think for younger kids, just asking them if they even know what that means, because they might have heard it from somewhere like TV or their parents, and they're just repeating it, and they don't really know what it means. So if you ask them if they know what it means, and you explain it to them, then explain why it's hurtful, why they think it could be hurtful to them, and then you could probably still kind of do the same thing that you did, like with older kids, and be like, well, would you want to be hurt like that?
Yeah.
And I think that'll make them more understanding of it. I don't know if it would completely cut it off, but that would be a start.
Yeah. Review the curriculum to ensure that there is no casual or implied acceptance of homophobia. Well, I mean, you just have to know everything that you're going to teach really well before you teach it to your classroom, to make sure that there's none of that in there.
Yeah, I mean, just going over it before you have class. I mean,
that's all you can do, really. Employ a proactive approach to dealing with and addressing homophobia and discrimination in your curriculum area.
Well, I mean, I know in high school we had an LGBTQ Gay Straight Alliance Club, which was a proactive way to get different people coming together, and that's not exactly with curriculum, but I mean, what starts at clubs eventually spreads through school. But also having, like you said, with different readings that can get them to start opening their minds to different things, different word problems for our younger kids, things like that, stories.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did we skip one?
Did we?
Ensure that.
Oh, yeah, you did. Ensure the curriculum provides opportunities to challenge learners to think about the implications of prejudice and discrimination. I think that would go along with the, making them read or write about a certain subject area, or like you guys said, putting that into word problems, that you don't have to be so gender specific or all heterosexual oriented.
That's what I'm wanting to work specifically 4th or 5th grade. So that's the age they're starting health. Maybe you could do something with that type of lesson. You could do something for those types of clubs, or setting up things starting that age before they get to middle school. And maybe that would help.
Yeah, I think one of the big things around 5th and 6th grade was that sexual health video, and they separated the boys and the girls, and then you weren't supposed to talk about it after. I mean, that makes everyone feel like they're so separate, and that your gender and sexuality is just supposed to be something so secretive. But
it's not, because everyone goes through.
Yeah. Why shouldn't a girl know about what's going on?
Why do they have to figure it out for themselves?
Yeah.
Why not teach them so that they know, so that they don't feel confused or scared? Yeah, exactly.
And what if that little girl who's going into this video doesn't relate to this? She's like, well, these aren't the things I'm feeling. Or what if she is intersex, and so she's going through what the boys are going through?
What do they do with students that are dealing with that? Do they have things that are set up already?
Because I know at my school, they didn't. It was you go there, and there was nothing in the middle. So, I mean, I think maybe even just having both of them watch it at the same time. I don't think it's going to be that big of a shock to, like, or
The
should
thing
it
they're
be?
already watching is kind of along those lines, but still separating them at any point is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's not inappropriate. It's not
Yeah.
pornographic. Everyone has it's just part of your body. Like,
Yeah.
it's just something that everyone goes through. So,
And by separating them, you're sexualizing something that doesn't need to be sexualized. Like, your bodies are not sexual. They are your bodies. I mean,
yeah.
you're teaching young kids that, ooh,
Yeah, you're
shouldn't.
sexualizing them by,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just and it's discriminatory towards certain kids too. So, I mean, parents are probably going to have a major fit over if you tried to combine them. But
You'll have your few, but I mean, there's always going to be the ones freaking out over it.
yeah.
And it's the
anyway.
ones at home that are speaking terribly, causing part of the problem.
And that's probably one of the big reasons why we need to, like, have a joint kind of thing like that.
I agree. Model appropriate behavior with regard to tackling and preventing homophobia and homophobic bullying. I mean, I just feel like being assertive. Like, you just have to be assertive. Like, no, we're not doing this. Like, absolutely not. Like, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, setting, like, an example for the students, like, if a boy wants to be called by she, then you go with it. You don't refuse to call them that. You don't, like, insist on calling them by their last name. You set an example for everyone, and then you set an example of how you treat them. You treat them the same as you would treat any other student in the room. You give them the same opportunities. And by doing that, like, the other kids will start to see, well, if the teacher is accepting of this, then I should be too.
Yeah. Challenge homophobia and explain why such behavior is unacceptable.
I mean, I don't think necessarily I'll have to deal as much with it. I think it also depends on, like, what type of school you're working in, if it's rural or suburb, like, just different types. I think you're going to deal with different things at different ages. But I mean, I think it's more so in your area. You'll have to deal more with it.
No, I definitely, I've thought about that already before, and I think there again, it's just challenging homophobia, you know, like, making them read about the way that people have felt and the way that society has kind of morphed this idea into something that's horrible, like the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I know you're not really supposed to bring religion into school, like your own religious beliefs, but kind of like say somebody tells me that they don't agree with homosexuality because they're Christian, because it's a sin and whatever. Well, then I'd say, well, if you believe that, then, like, they're the ones that have to deal with that, not you. And also, like, it says in the Bible that every sin is created equal. So when you sin, that's the same thing as what you think they're doing by being gay or lesbian or so on. Like, just educating them
And
in any way that I can, really.
I've worked with elementary kids for a while, and I've had a fourth grader come up to me and be like, ew, like, two boys, like, kissing? Gross. Like, that's so disgusting. I was like, well, what if your, like, best friend was like this? Or what if your brother was like this and people were making fun of him and they said he was gross? Would you want them thinking he was gross? And be like, well, no, but I'm like, well, maybe you should think about that then. And I mean, that's going to be something you're going to have to do, and it's going to be more prevalent in high school, but it happens in elementary too.
Yeah. Okay, provide support to victims of homophobia. I just think that, like, making sure they know that your classroom is a safe haven for them, like, they can come in and they can talk to you, and you're not going to judge, and you will just listen. Like, you don't even have to say anything. You'll just listen to what they have to say, hug them if they need it. Like,
Yeah, make sure they know that you're there for them.
yeah. React consistently, sensitively, and appropriately to homophobic incidences.
I mean, just by doing that, just by always being consistent, always being sensitive, and, you know, always making sure you're thinking about the word choice that you're using, and that you're not favoring one person over another. I mean, by doing that every day, you're going to stay consistent and sensitive. And yeah.
Challenge the derisive use of language and around gender and sexuality. I think that goes along with like what you said about the word problems, like saying Sally plays with trucks or something like that. Like there doesn't always have to be these gender norms that are so set in stone. Like you can be whoever you want to be, and you don't have to be this way just because you're a girl. If it makes you more comfortable to wear a guy's shirt, then wear a guy's shirt. Like,
yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, it's so silly that people like tell a little boy he can't come to school because he wanted to wear, like, I don't know, a dress or something. Like, I mean, is that going to affect his learning? So
like you're affecting his education by telling him he can't go to school because of how who he is.
So if you start to like, if you want to challenge derisive language, I mean, if you're showing them examples of that in the classroom, I mean, they're going to not say that kind of stuff. I mean,
work on biases. Remember that the problem is homophobia and not homosexuality.
I would just say, since it's about the homophobia, to make sure that if there's a student you think that may be even slightly gay, to not try to shun them or anything, to make sure that they're strictly like included always, or maybe even a little bit more to make like pay attention a bit more to them, just to make sure they're getting what they need. Not like you have to play with him because he doesn't have friends or something like that. Just make sure that you're watching maybe closer.
And like the bias, people who already have a bias towards gay men or women, like you were saying, with if it was for religious reasons, like challenging them to think from multiple perspectives and not just their own. I mean, that's something they're going to be able to do starting, I mean, probably around 6th grade, they're really going to be able to start doing that. So, I mean, just having them think more than outside of their little bubble and who they are.
Combat heterosexism in your classroom by visibly including LGBTQI issues and people. Well, I feel like that question kind of answered itself. Like, you would have to include these issues and like maybe bring in a guest speaker, like especially for my age group, like bring in a gay or lesbian or trans or whatever guest speaker, and you know, have them talk about their life in the way that society as a whole has affected how they've thought about themselves. And
And for us, when we have classrooms that we have to decorate, try making like a little figures of a family with 2 dads or something like that, instead of, you know,
always
the typical
making it
The norm.
Yeah, I mean, just that will visibly, they'll see that every day, and that'll help.
Because that will have an impact. They notice that type of thing. They'll be like, what's that for? And you can go into like a short little lesson or something. But they do notice those types of things.
I agree.
Yeah, is that all of them?
Yep.
Is there anything else we need to do?
I think so.
All right.